Hello, my friend. Let me ask you something quietly. Have you ever believed that living closer to your children or grandchildren would bring more joy, connection, and meaning to your golden years, only to find it's not quite what you expected? You're not alone. Many seniors across America have shared similar experiences. What seemed like the right move became a source of quiet stress, emotional distance, and even a sense of being invisible in the lives of those they love most. Today, we're going to talk about something few people say out loud. Being physically close to family doesn't always lead to emotional closeness. In fact, sometimes it creates silent guilt, a loss of independence, and a kind of loneliness that's hard to explain. But this conversation isn't meant to discourage you. It's meant to empower you, because understanding this truth could help you make decisions that protect your emotional health, preserve your identity, and allow you to enjoy the freedom, peace, and resilience you've earned over the years. If this resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to more honest, compassionate videos like this. Please leave a comment below, just a quick "I understand" or share your experience. And if you feel this could help someone you know, give it a like. When I moved just a few blocks away from my daughter, I truly believed it would bring us closer. I pictured warm Sunday dinners, the sound of little footsteps running through my hall, and afternoons spent helping with school projects or folding laundry together while we caught up. I thought being nearby would make us part of each other's daily lives in a way that felt comforting, natural, and deeply connected. But what unfolded was something far different. Most evenings, I found myself alone at the kitchen table, reheating. Leftovers in the microwave, the soft hum of the appliance replacing the laughter I had imagined. My daughter wasn't being unkind, she was simply overwhelmed. Between her job, errands, parenting, and everything life throws at you when you're in the middle of your most demanding years, there wasn't much left over to give. And so, even though we lived in the same zip code, I began to feel like a ghost in the background of her life. It made me realize something that many of us don't consider until we live it. Closeness isn't about physical location. It's about how we show up for one another emotionally. Being in the same neighborhood doesn't mean we share quiet conversations, laughter, or time. It doesn't mean we feel seen or heard. Often, it means we see the front door but rarely get invited inside. The truth is, emotional connection is built on intention, not convenience. It's built on choosing to sit down and listen, not just wave as we pass by. We tend to assume that just being available means we're included, but that assumption can lead to deep disappointment, especially for seniors craving meaningful moments in a stage of life where every interaction feels more precious. I've since learned that one warm, thoughtful video call a week can sometimes mean more than living across the street. When that call includes eye contact, laughter, a shared memory, or even a bit of silence filled with care, it carries weight. It nourishes the spirit. Because what we long for most at this age isn't logistics, it's connection. And that's something that can't be measured by steps or miles. Emotional health, especially after 60, is tied to feeling valued, listened to, and involved, not simply present. Seniors don't need to be physically close to thrive. We need to feel emotionally close, intentionally, and consistently. And sometimes, a bit of distance actually creates the space for that intention to grow stronger. What we don't say often becomes heavier than anything we could have spoken aloud. When I first moved near my daughter, I thought it would bring comfort and closeness, but instead, I found myself hesitating, holding back little requests, avoiding calls when I wasn't feeling well, convincing myself she was too busy. I didn't want to seem needy or demanding. "They've got enough on their plate," I'd whisper to myself. "Don't be a burden." What I didn't realize was that while I was quietly carrying that fear, she was carrying guilt. One night, after a rushed dinner and a distracted goodbye, she finally said it. "Mom," she whispered, "I feel like I'm failing you when I'm not around enough." That moment sat between us like a mirror. We were both hurting, not because either of us meant harm, but because neither of us knew how to say what we really felt. The guilt, the pressure, the weight of unmet expectations. It was slowly wearing us both down. Living close had created this invisible contract, one where I felt I should never ask for too much, and she felt she could never give enough. And yet, neither of us ever agreed to those terms. I've learned that proximity, while meant to ease the load, can often deepen the emotional weight between generations. In countless conversations I've read in support groups and forums, adult children speak of burnout, not just from caregiving, but from constantly feeling like they're letting someone down. And parents, too, often sit in silence, grieving, not because they're unloved, but because they sense their presence has become another box to check in someone else's already full day. For it's not about fault, it's about human limits. When we live nearby, we think it'll be easier to help, easier to connect, easier to feel supported. But what can happen is a slow, quiet erosion of emotional clarity. We begin walking on eggshells, unsure of when to ask, when to offer, when to simply be. That lack of clarity breeds guilt and misunderstanding on both sides. And guilt, especially the kind we don't talk about, steals joy. It makes both parent and child feel like they're constantly falling short even when they're doing their best. True emotional health in this stage of life means having open conversations, setting boundaries, and letting go of unspoken obligations. It means allowing our children to be human and ourselves to be honest. Sometimes maintaining a little physical distance gives us room to rebuild that emotional freedom. It lets love come through choice, not obligation. And that difference, subtle as it may be, changes everything. Living close to my family made things easier, but somewhere along the way it also made me smaller. I stopped doing things I once enjoyed. I stopped going to the grocery store because my daughter offered to pick things up. I stopped driving to the library, even though I loved the quiet there because it seemed simpler to wait for someone to take me. At first, it felt like convenience, but over time, I realized I had slowly stopped making decisions on my own. Was no longer choosing how to spend my day. I was waiting to be included in someone else's, waiting for a call, waiting for an invitation, waiting and forgetting how to lead my own life. The moment that truly opened my eyes was when my granddaughter, full of energy and curiosity, asked me, "Grandma, what do you like doing these days?" And I sat there, unable to answer. I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a choice. That was just for me. Independence isn't just about whether you can drive or cook a meal. It's about feeling capable, confident, and in control of your own routine. It's about being able to say, "This is what I enjoy," or "This is where I'm going today," without needing someone else's approval or assistance. When you live too close to family, it becomes tempting to lean in, to ask, to rely. And while there's nothing wrong with accepting help, there's a quiet danger in forgetting how to live without it. For many seniors, this overdependence doesn't feel like weakness at first. It feels like love. But slowly it can chip away at your identity. You become someone who waits, not someone who initiates, someone who adjusts, rather than someone who decides. You lose touch with that spark that kept you moving forward. But space has a way of reigniting that spark. When you live at a distance, you're gently pushed to stay active, to plan ahead, to maintain your own daily rhythm. You start to reclaim parts of yourself that got buried under everyone else's needs. You walk to the market not because you have to, but because you want to. You join a book club or gardening circle because your calendar is yours again. That's not just a schedule, it's your life returning to your hands. And that kind of autonomy, especially in your later years, is not just freeing, it's life extending. Seniors who stay mentally and physically engaged, who maintain routines and make their own choices, tend to experience better emotional health, stronger resilience, and a greater sense of purpose. So while moving closer may sound like the right thing to do, ask yourself if it supports your independence or slowly replaces it. Because who you are still matters, and keeping that identity strong is one of the most important ways to age with dignity and joy. I love my daughter. That has never changed and never will. But when I moved just a few doors down from her, I noticed something I hadn't expected: tiny shifts, quiet moments of tension that seemed to build up without warning. It started with little things like me offering advice about what the kids should be eating or questioning how much screen time they were getting. To me, it came from love. To her, it felt like judgment. She didn't say it outright, but I could feel the resistance, The way her smile tightened, or her responses grew shorter. At first I brushed it off, telling myself I was just trying to help. But over time I realized I was stepping into a space she needed to navigate on her own. I wasn't just her mother anymore. I was living within her daily world, and that changed everything. We weren't meeting by choice anymore, we were colliding by default. Living too close can blur lines that keep relationships healthy. It's one thing to visit your children occasionally, to talk, to share, to laugh, and then return to your own space. It's another to share sidewalks, routines, and unspoken expectations. The proximity creates more chances for interaction, but not all interaction is meaningful. Sometimes it's just more opportunities to misunderstand each other, and misunderstandings, even small ones, can build up like dust in corners, easy to ignore at first, but harder to clean up later. The truth is, when you're always around, you start to notice everything. And when you notice everything, it becomes easy to speak up when silence might have been kinder. What I thought were loving gestures slowly felt like interruptions to her, and what she thought were boundaries felt like walls to me. We never had a big fight, but we drifted apart in the smallest, saddest ways. Distance, I've come to believe, holds its own kind of wisdom. It creates room for perspective, for both sides to reflect, to miss each other, to choose kindness over habit. When you live apart, your visits become intentional. Your words carry more thought. Your presence becomes a gift, not a given. And that shift changes everything. Respect grows in the space between visits. Appreciation deepens when you're not always there. You begin to protect peace instead of simply reacting to proximity. Relationships, especially between parents and adult children, need breathing room to stay strong. Too much closeness can make roles overlap, boundaries blur, and the love you've built begin to feel like obligation or control. I've learned that it's better to love my daughter from a bit of a distance, to let her run her home, raise her children, and reach out when she needs me. And when she does, I show up with a full heart and no resentment. That's how respect is preserved. That's how love matures, not by hovering, but by honoring the invisible space that keeps us close in the ways that truly matter. I once met a woman in her 70s who had just retired and made a decision that surprised her entire family. She moved to a quiet coastal town in Oregon, far from where her children lived. While some people whispered that she must be lonely or running away from something, what I saw in her eyes was the opposite. She was finally running toward herself. She signed up for a watercolor class at the local community center, started biking along the shoreline each morning, and even began dating a kind gentleman she met at a poetry night. Her kids came to visit every few months, and when they did, they were welcomed by a woman full of light, purpose, and joy. Not someone waiting in silence for their company, but someone living fully and inviting them into her world. That encounter stayed with me because it gently challenged a story I had told myself for years, that aging meant becoming smaller, quieter, and safer by proximity. That our value in old age came from being useful, being near, being ready at all times. But what if that's not the whole truth? So many of us have spent decades caring for everyone else. We built lives around the needs of children, spouses, careers, and aging parents. And when all that begins to quiet down, we're left facing something most people don't prepare us for, ourselves. The empty spaces of retirement can feel like a loss, or they can become an invitation. This stage of life isn't about fading, it's about unfolding, about asking yourself for the first time in years, what do I want now? Not what everyone else expects, but what brings you peace, curiosity, and joy. For some, it might be joining a walking group, learning to cook a new cuisine, or moving somewhere new. For others, it might be as simple as reclaiming quiet mornings with a good book and a hot cup of tea. The form doesn't matter, the freedom does. True emotional health in our later years often comes not from being surrounded, but from being centered, from waking up with a plan that belongs to us, from knowing that even if our kids are thriving in their own world, we're thriving in ours. That sense of vitality, of personal meaning, adds years to your life, and life to your years. And yes, your family might not understand at first. They might ask why you don't want to move closer or why you're choosing this path. But when they see you thriving, when they hear the excitement in your voice or see the glow on your face, they'll understand. You're not abandoning anyone. You're simply remembering someone very important, yourself. After all, this isn't just a quiet ending, it's your next chapter, and you deserve for it to be bold, free, and written entirely in your own words. Connection isn't measured by how many steps it takes to reach someone's front door. It's measured by how often you feel seen, heard, and loved. My best friend and I haven't lived in the same state in over a decade, yet every Tuesday at 9 a.m., we're both sitting with our tea on a video call, catching up like no time has passed. We talk about everything, her garden, my arthritis, what we're reading, and sometimes we sit in silence that still feels like company. That 1 hour fills my heart more than some entire weeks spent surrounded by people who are too busy to look up from their phones. And my grandson, sweet boy that he is, sends me a voice message every Sunday. They're not long, sometimes they're just silly jokes or updates about school, but I save them all. I play them when I'm folding laundry or when I'm feeling a little off. And each time I smile. He might live in another city, but I never feel far from him. This is the quiet truth so many forget. You don't have to live next door to stay close. What you need is consistency, intention, rhythms that create emotional warmth and meaningful presence. In fact, some of the strongest families I've come across in my life are not the ones who live within walking distance. They're the ones who've built strong emotional bridges through letters, photos, video calls, shared playlists, and even group chats. These small gestures don't just fill the gaps in distance, they strengthen the bond in ways that rushed, distracted in-person visits often can't. Living apart gives each person space to breathe, to grow, and to connect when it's genuine, not out of obligation, but out of love. Too often, seniors are made to feel guilty for choosing space. But emotional health thrives on freedom, not pressure. And staying emotionally connected while physically apart teaches us to be deliberate with our love. It teaches us that presence isn't about location, it's about participation. When we reach out with sincerity, when we respond with warmth, when we show interest in one another's lives, that's when closeness blossoms. It's not geography that makes a family strong, it's the quality of the moments you choose to share. So, if you're worried that distance will pull you apart, let me offer a gentle reminder. It doesn't have to. You can be the grandparent who sends a video every birthday. You can be the parent who calls on Sunday just to say, "I'm thinking of you." You can stay involved without stepping into every detail. And in doing so, you give your children the gift of freedom and your relationship, the gift of lasting respect. Because sometimes loving with a little space is what allows everyone to grow, even closer. So here's the quiet truth, my friend. Living close to your children doesn't always lead to a closer relationship. In fact, sometimes a little distance brings more peace, more clarity, and more connection than sharing a zip code ever could. What matters most in this season of life isn't proximity, it's presence. Emotional presence, respect, freedom to be yourself. You've spent years giving, nurturing, and putting others first. Now it's your time to reset your rhythm, rebuild your independence, and create a life that reflects who you truly are, not just someone else's parent or grandparent, but a whole person with your own needs, dreams, and peace of mind. Remember, emotional health, especially after 60, isn't about being available 24/7. It's about being whole, grounded, and deeply connected, even from afar. If today's message spoke to your heart, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space where seniors can learn from each other and feel less alone in these decisions. And if this video helped you reflect, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more honest, compassionate content made just for you.